We will examine how humans reduce biodiversity. Now, we started to talk about this, but we ran out of time. And I'm going to quickly go through it today. And then period 6, we're going to tackle the big question, which is natural selection, which in my opinion is the most important thing. We're not even going to talk about all of natural selection. We're just going to start talking about natural selection. So, lesson 49, artificial selection. We'll examine how humans reduce biodiversity. Let's go backwards to see what we did last lesson. Last lesson we looked at, and if you haven't copied this down, if you need more time to copy slides down, you need to let me know, okay? So last lesson what we did, before we talked about this, and I put these slides on the classroom, I'm pretty sure. Yes, I think I did. If I haven't though, please let me know. We're talking about biodiversity and what that meant. Biodiversity, of course, means difference in living things, so the variation in living things. How are they different? And we said there are two ways we can talk about it. Species diversity, so that's in an ecosystem. So if I've got a rainforest, I've got butterflies, I've got ferns, I've got conifers, I've got moss, I've also got beetles, bugs, worms, cicadas, toucans, whatever. I've got so many different types of species. But genetic diversity is how diverse the different organisms are in a particular species. So for dogs, yeah, sure, all dogs are one species of animal, but you can have pugs, you can have Dobermans, you can have greyhounds, fox terriers, Shiba Inus, so on and so forth, sausage dogs, so many beagles, so many different types of dogs, and they are all dogs, but they are different because their genetics are different. That's genetic diversity. By the way, just for a quick thing, you know what, while I've got this slide open, let's just do one thing here, which is it's actually kind of really bad as well to make something that's really has low diversity. It turns out that actually, you know what? I'm going to talk about that later on. I'm just going to come back up. I'll come back to that later on, but I'll talk about purebred dogs. We talked about what environments, and we sort of talked about that. We talked about the advantage of genetic diversity. Well, why is it good? It's good because if a virus comes in, then guess what? You're going to be protected. Some of your particular species may die, but because you're diverse, some of you will survive. It also means that if you're diverse, if someone discovers a way to survive better, then great, they can pass that on to future generations. So you can improve as a species. We talked about, well, how does this genetic variation occur? Well, we said it's because of mutation. So it's when a gene doesn't copy correctly, which might be because it makes a malfunction in the copying process. Maybe because that DNA is damaged by radiation, by age, by whatever. And sexual reproduction mixes genes up between two organisms. That's a really good way to get some variety. So we talked about variety in your genes, variety in them. So why are they good? If you do have a variation, if you do get a variation that can be an advantage, we call that an adaptation. And so the variations can be structural, so like a hair color, behavioral, so like how you interact with the world, or physiological, what your body can do. Can your body you might evolve to be able to eat. If you're a particular animal, you might evolve to be able to eat flowers, and so therefore that means that you can, or flowering plants, and so that means that you can survive longer. Whereas animals that don't, and that's actually one of the reasons I think that maybe the dinosaurs went extinct, is because there were so many flowering plants that their bodies couldn't eat, so they didn't evolve fast enough, so they just died out. But that's a theory. There are many other theories for why the dinosaurs died. I'm not going to go into them here though. We talked about adaptation, and then we talked about so that's variation in a population. So that's how you get a variation in an individual. They could just get a mutation, and then that mutation might be really good this poor bunny has got a white fur mutation, so maybe to its parents it's like, you look really weird, but then when it starts hopping around in the snow, it's camo, so therefore it's not going to get eaten as often. We talked about variation, and this is where we came up with the word gene pool. And gene pool is all the available traits that a particular thing can get. If you remove something, so for example, if like you remove something from the gene, someone from an area, if you kill them before they have children, then they won't be able to add to the gene pool. We talked about immigration, which is moving from one place to another, and how that can change the gene pool. And then we just said, well, what is the gene pool? It's like, you know, a fruit salad. You've got different traits that you could get from each spoonful. And we said, you know, if you want, like, what's this fruit salad missing? Well, it's missing some apples. So maybe you could add some apple, and that would make the gene pool more rich and stuff like that, you know. But you don't want a boring gene pool. You do not want, like what we're going to talk about today, you don't want a reduction biodiversity. This is a bunch of, we should already have this written down from last lesson, but yeah, if you don't want to have a bunch of bananas that are all 100% identical, because there are issues with that. And we're going to talk about what those issues are very, very shortly. And we have made some really good ways to replicate the perfect organism. That's actually a bit of a weird word here, but I'm actually going to use that. But this can reduce biodiversity. When I say perfect organism, I mean like, oh, well, this is the best version of a cow. This is the best version of a horse. This is the best version of a dog. So we're just going to keep like copying this particular animal or this particular plant because it's so good. This is the tastiest banana or the tastiest apple. We're going to keep copying this organism. And if you keep copying that organism, then only that particular gene is the one that keeps getting put forward. And if only that particular gene gets put into the gene pool, then that gene pool is going to get very, very few genes. And so therefore, it's going to become a very shallow gene pool, which is bad. You don't want to have a gene pool with very few traits, because that means that you could have some bad things happen. We then went through this. If you don't remember this, let me show you. Artificial selection. So I spent a lot of time working on this. I said, well, what happens if we choose to plant particular plants? And then what happens is that you get a little bit of variation. There is a bit of variation here. Sure, we planted this plant, but some of these plants came out to be, you know, some of these and some of these. And so we've got some variation, but ultimately we're going to plant just one of those. And then we get some more variation. And eventually we can get a particular organism that we're happy with. And that will be the only one we plant. And so therefore, every future generation will look exactly like this one here, because we're only planting and harvesting them. If you plant one of these particular types of carrots in this situation and you get something that looks like this, you might just throw that in the bin because you won't, but you know, because there will be some variation, but ultimately if you keep planting the same type of carrot, eventually you'll end up there. And artificial selection, did I get you guys to copy this slide down? I don't remember. Can you guys get a yes or a no in chat? I think I did. If you guys haven't copied this down, I will put this up for a little bit.
Yeah, you did. You put a pencil. You
Cool.
drew because you forgot.
That's right. So you guys have got this copied down, so I'll just talk about this now. Humans have been selective breeding animals and plants for hundreds of years. This is how to make bigger vegetables or cows that make more milk. This is done by breeding the best organisms. So you find the best carrot and that's the one that you plant. And so then you keep doing that. And then I said, well, look, this is how some organisms have changed over time. So grab a look at what the ancient watermelons used to look like. But because we've bred the juiciest watermelon, and then we took that watermelon, we bred, and like out of its children, we bred the juiciest watermelon out of that. Eventually we end up with watermelons that are pretty good. In fact, we also sometimes end up with watermelons that don't have seeds, so it's like, or very few seeds. So therefore, that's really good because, you know, people don't like seeds. And we went through and looked at some of these other ones as well. Now, what I wanted to wrap up on for this idea here is I wanted to wrap up on this. So this is artificial selection. This is a new slide for me. This is what we've been doing with crops for hundreds of thousands of years. And so, yeah, sure, we've been changing biodiversity as humans since essentially agriculture came into existence about 30,000 years ago. So, and yes, I did say 30,000 years ago because I think we've been having agriculture for about that long, but don't quote me on that one. But what can we do now with modern science? How can we change biodiversity with modern science? And this is what I was trying to get to last lesson. With modern science, we can modify organisms even more. The first type is artificial insemination, but this also can just be regular insemination. But yeah, artificial insemination is when you take semen from a successful racehorse or cow or whatever, and can be used to make multiple offspring. So what happens is you get, like, you know, this amazing horse. We'll just use a horse example, but you know, you could use this for whatever. And this amazing horse, like, you know, wins. This amazing horse comes first in like this amazing horse comes first in the Melbourne Cup. So what they do is they take the semen of that horse and they use it to make a bunch of baby horses. And all these baby horses will have the same. All these baby horses all have the same dad. And that doesn't mean that these horses, and that doesn't mean that these. And so that means one horse can go on to have, like, you know, 6 to like 20 different baby horses. That's not to say that one horse. That's not to say that these horses will be amazing, because there's still like a bit of variation there. You're not saying that for certain that they're going to be. They're not exact copies of that horse. But, you know, it's more likely that you could end up with a good one. So, like, yeah, like, this is probably pretty gross to think about, but I reckon that after the Melbourne Cup and stuff like that, I reckon probably I reckon they probably sell, yes, I would like you to write this down. I reckon they probably sell expensive horse semen to people to use to make, like, winning race horses. And it might sound a bit weird, but, you know, that's what might happen. That's what probably happens, is that they probably sell this stuff because it's so expensive, because it can make a winning horse. What about in vitro fertilization? In vitro and artificial insemination doesn't just you can do that by removing the semen from a horse, or you could just say, well, right, you've got a winning horse. Can you bring that over to my stables, and I'll just get it to do the deed with some female horses. We'll just, you know, draw some curtains and put some Barry Manilow music on, and, you know, light some candles and come back, and then, you know, a couple months later, I'll have a winning racehorse. So that's artificial insemination. That's sort of also a pretty old technique. Okay, so we've been doing that for a very long time. Is like getting specific animals to breed, controlling it. In vitro fertilization takes that step to a little bit further. That's when you fertilize an egg outside of a human body, outside of an animal, outside of a human, whatever, and then you can scan it. You can look at that animal and you can look at it and say, hey, this animal's got these particular traits. We don't want these ones, so we're going to, you know, maybe not use this particular fertilized egg. We're going to use this one, and so therefore you can choose specific genes to get put forwards rather than relying on chance to pick the genes for you. And the last one, of course, is cloning. Cloning takes guesswork out of takes the randomness away completely. If you want to clone something, instead of using seeds, you can just clone or copy a plant. Now, there have not been, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you can ignore me, but apparently there have not been any cloned human beings to exist. At least that's what the science believes, and that's sort of what I believe, that there is rumors that some people may have tried to clone humans. But yeah, humans have never been cloned. Now you can, and even then, like sheep have only been cloned once or twice. Animals don't really get cloned. Plants, we clone plants all the time. Every single banana that you buy is probably a clone of a banana that you ate the week before. Plants get cloned all the time because all you do is you take cuttings of one tree and use it to make a new tree. So therefore, all of the children of that tree will be the same. All of the fruit of that tree will be the same. Dogs can be cloned. I have actually seen that. I watched the documentary in 60 Minutes recently. So you can clone them. They're very, very expensive as well. So people, what they'll do is they'll clone their dead animals so that they can have it forever. And I have to admit, from a psychological perspective, I got mixed feelings about that. I'm like, well, not psychology, from philosophical. I'm kind of like, as much as you love your animal, when it dies, you should let it. This is personal opinion, by the way, ladies and gents. This is not like, if you don't believe me, don't worry. I just think it's unfortunately, if your animal dies, you should just like let it go. It's really kind of depressing, and I think it's hard, and it's a very difficult thing to do, but you should just let it go. I think if you were to clone an animal, it's like, one, there's like a lot of like, you don't just get one puppy, you can get like 3 or 4 puppies, and so what do you do with the extra ones? And then it's like also that puppy is not the same as the one as that you lost. It's going to be different, so then therefore it's not, yeah, it's kind of I just can't. And then you would attach feelings towards the new puppy that you had for the old puppy. I think it's just better to give a home. My personal opinion about dogs is you should give a home to a new dog. If you should go to, I personally think you should go to the town. You should go to Lost Dogs Home, which is where we got one of our dogs from, and the other one we got from an adoption program, and just give them a better chance at life, because they may have had a rough life, and so it's better to give a new dog something hopeful to have in their lives rather than cloning an old dog. But that's a personal belief of mine. Just thought I'd throw it out there. Now let's keep going. I've got 2 more slides to go through. I wanted to talk about how this is called the shallow gene pool. Cloning out of, this is probably like the second last slide. But yeah, okay, so cloning an artificial, I'd like you to copy this down here. So we've got a bunch of different humans here, some of them tall, some of them short, some of them yellow, blue, green, purple, pink. I've got one of them in a wheelchair as well. So, and of course, this is just in general talking about I guess, thinking about it. Cloning artificial selection both force only one organism with one set of genes to populate. So what that means is that it's like you're limiting the gene pool here. You're only allowing one set of genes to be populated. You can't really know. So that's one of the that's the first thing here. And of course, this is sort of what I was talking about as well with purebred dogs. Purebred dogs, of course, you are artificially selecting one particular type of dog. So if you think about like pugs and greyhounds and sausage dogs, and Shiba Inus and so on and so forth. They're all one type of dog. They're all purebred dogs. And purebred dogs are great, but because they're so purebred, because they have so few genes that are unique, it can mean that they can get sick very easily. Artificial insemination makes less unique genes in a population. So if you get a prize animal and you get that too, and maybe it's like the dog that wins the dog show, right? If you get that dog to then have puppies and then you only use that dog to make puppies, then you're going to get less unique genes in the gene pool. And of course, and then of course, IVF can allow parents to select specific babies without mutations. This also reduces unique mutations. So if you think about someone like, if you thought about someone that, you know, hey, this person, like in nature, a child that is born without, like, with spina bifida that can't use their back, that would just be something that maybe, you know, it's a mutation that just happens. And so, yeah, and sometimes those mutations will be good. But if you start to remove those mutations, if you start to say, I don't want my child to have this particular mutation, this particular disease, yeah, sure, we can do that as human beings, that's fine. But it does mean that the gene pool will be reduced. All of these remove unique genes. They remove the genes that make us different. And essentially what they encourage is they encourage similar organisms. They encourage us all to be the same. And it's the same. It doesn't matter if we do this in dogs. It encourages all dogs to be the same. If I told you about a dog, if I told you about, like, I don't know, right, if I said to you guys, oh, I've got a greyhound, you guys can be like, oh, if you guys know dogs well, you can be like, oh, I know what that dog would look like. That's because we are this less unique. Whereas if I told you I've got, I don't know, something that's a bit more, if I told you that I've got a dog, that's a bit more broad. But as we slowly try to make things less and less unique, and we make them more and more the same, and less unique genes means we make things similar, and that can be bad. I've put a little bit of effort into this slide. I was actually kind of happy with this, how this change of things happened, and I tried to do it as I was talking to try and make you guys think. It's like, yeah, we started out with a bunch of bright colors that were all different, people with long arms, people with short arms, and now we've ended up with, because we've gone through all of these different ways, the same organism. I thought it was actually pretty cool, but you know, I wasted some time on this. I've got another slide that I wasted some time on. So then we've got this last sort of slide. This is the last slide, actually. Look at that. We made it to the end. Is this bad? So this is the sort of thing I wanted to end on. Is this bad? And the answer is sort of. I would say yes. You could say no. This is definitely.
But Brendan was just
Sorry, someone wants me to go back. Give me a sec. I'll put this up for a little bit longer. Sorry, did you say? Yeah, I'll put this up for a little bit longer. So yeah, yeah, all of these ways reduce the unique genes. They reduce the different genes. And so, like, if you think about it, right, you know, like, you know, let's just say you had, like, if a plant, I was watching one of these things recently, which was this people online, they were hatching these turtles, and they were, you know, one of the turtles just came out a bit deformed. And they said, well, listen, this turtle that came out deformed, in nature, what would happen is that turtle would get eaten by some kind of bird. It would be someone's lunch. And that's actually not a bad thing. It's actually saying, yeah, this deformity that this mutation that you've got is actually not a good mutation. It means that you get eaten more likely. But if that turtle had been born with a mutation where it gets longer legs that makes it move faster, then that would be a good mutation. It would be an adaptation. So one of the things you guys are going to have to do is whenever I use the word mutation, you're going to have to really stop yourself and think, that doesn't mean it's a good thing. Doesn't mean you should be thinking about X-Men and mutants and like how cool it would be to have laser eyes. But also doesn't mean it's a bad thing. We're not talking about one-eyed scary monsters. We're saying a mutation is a roll of the dice. And what we're doing with artificial selection and with artificial insemination and IVF is we're saying you can roll the dice, but then I'm going to pick the dice up and I'm going to put it on a 6. Or you could just make sure the dice only has 6s on it so that you don't have, it doesn't matter what you roll, you're going to get a 6. That's what we're doing, is we're controlling the randomness. And that can be a bad thing. It's like, if you can control the randomness, then why is this bad? Well, like I'm about to show you guys. I'm going to change the slide now. We cool?
Yes, we are cool.
Okay. This is the last slide. So this is what we're going to finish up with. If we control the randomness, what happens? Low biodiversity means that a population may not survive a change in environment, climate, or a brand new disease. So one of the examples that I've got for this, and so yeah, as I said, is it a good thing or a bad thing? When you talk about in humans, like, listen, I'll be honest with you guys, and look, like, I like being able to go to I love eating pink lady apples. They're my favorite apple. They're this red apple. They're pretty sweet, but they're not overly sweet, and they're really crunchy. That's what I love about a good pink lady apple, is that it's a really crunchy apple. And here's the thing, right? I love that I can go to the store, and if not only do I, when I look at the different apple species, I can actually pick a specific genetic variation of an apple that I know exactly what it's going to taste like. I love being able to know exactly what this apple will taste like before I bite into it. It's not a guess. That is what artificial selection has done, and that is what cloning has done. That has meant that it's been easy for humans to do that. With cows, it means that we can know that we can get, like, you know, when this cow grows up, I know that I am going to be able to get, like, I don't know, 120 liters of milk from this cow every week, you know, because of the type of cow that I've been breeding. And that's one of the really good things. But it does have its, and of course, artificial insemination, IVF, means that if I can check to see, is my child, if I use IVF, is my child going to have Down disease? If it is, maybe we want to use a different egg before we fertilize it or something like that. But there are some downsides to it, of course. One of the classic ones is called, and I'm putting it down the bottom, is there was a really, really popular red apple in America called the Baldwin apple. This was very popular in America. It was probably one of the only apples that got eaten. One cold winter, it was pretty much wiped out. Like, it was pretty much killed because that apple couldn't deal with the cold climate. And because every single apple was an exact clone, they all struggled with the cold weather the same amount. And so therefore they all died. This is why biodiversity is important. And as I keep talking about, again, there's also the same thing occurs with animals. If you pure breed a dog, that's great. You have this perfect, you know you're going to get a sausage dog, you know what they're going to look like. But it does mean that if there are any issues with that dog, any illnesses with that dog, it may not be able to, won't be unique. It might not be able to survive. When we talk about these, you talk about a population. So you pretty much can't buy Baldwin apples anymore because of this, because essentially they got wiped out. And that's why, again, and the same thing occurs with any type of species, is when you start to get really, really specific. And that's why in nature, having diversity is so important. Thank you, ladies and gents, for listening to that. I'm pretty happy now that we've covered artificial selection and how humans can mess around with this kind of thing. The next topic, which we're going to talk about, period 6, is a topic that I've been gearing up for a while, which is actually dealing with evolution from nature. If this is how humans manipulate evolution, and we're pretty comfortable that humans can change evolution by modern science or just by planting certain plants, then how does nature do it? What does nature do to evolve things? And that's what we're going to be talking about next lesson.